Hi everyone, William here. I'm set back a ways. I'm not sure. It almost seems like my phone tripod has shrunk overnight, so I had to rest it on two books. Anyway, yeah, this is the Grand Duke Dmitri Diary series. I should have started with that. Um, and we are still in February 1940, but we will be finishing that up. Not today, but in the next video. Yeah, I apologize for being, for not uploading anything the last couple days. If anybody was looking for them, I like to think someone was looking for them. But when I get back from one of my stays in Switzerland, yeah, it's always a bit hard to get caught up with everything. All right, our recap. We did the 21st through the 23rd of February, and Dmitri was very surprised that his son in the United States, Paul Ilinsky, sent him a photo of Nicholas and Alexandra. Yeah, that would have been surprising, opening your son's letter and seeing that. And that was one of the things I never thought to talk to Paul Ilinsky about. I never asked him what kind of discussions he had with his father or any other member of the family or the Russian people around about what had happened in Russia and what Nicholas and Alexandra were like. I wish I had asked that, because it would be interesting to have heard very interesting to have heard what Paulie had heard from his father. But on the other hand, you know, so many decades had gone by, and in that day and age, parents didn't talk to their children about things like that typically. I'm aware of that from research I've done over the years, being in touch with a lot of people who were not old enough to remember pre-revolutionary Russia, but whose parents had fled pre-revolutionary Russia, and hearing from those people, from their own children, people of my own generation, that their parents had never talked to them about what about what they had experienced from their parents and grandparents and learned about the revolution and things like that. Anyway, I'm particularly talkative today, aren't I? So he got this photo of Nicholas and Alexandra. He talked about how he'd been sick every evening. He was having chest pain. He was feeling hot, even though the thermometer showed that he didn't have a fever. He was starting to be a little mistrustful of Dr. Maurer, who didn't seem to be taking it terribly seriously, but he was also relieved that Dr. Maurer then told him, well, don't worry, it's gastric disorder. It's a gastric disorder, not tuberculosis related. And that was enough for Dmitri at this present moment to satisfy him. Okay, so today we'll do the 24th through the 26th, so let's get started. 24th February 1940, Friday. Splendid weather, morning and evening on my balcony until 5:30, feel much better. All these strange manifestations are simply gastric in nature, even my dry cough. Photos taken with the new camera, Retina 2, turned out wonderfully. So, yeah, he's definitely reassured by that diagnosis. And it certainly is true that a gastric disorder, that stomach problems, can cause a dry cough. And a tuberculous cough would more likely be a productive cough. But the big thing was that he'd gotten this camera. There's some other diary entry or letter where he talks about this camera that he was really excited about. Like many Romanovs, he was crazy about photography, and like even his grandson Michael, I think, was a professional photographer for part of his career. And yeah, unfortunately, I have seen pictures of Dmitri at Shots Out that were in Dmitri's own collection that's now at the Tsarskaya Selo Central State Reserve and Museum in Russia. But all of those photos show Dmitri, all the ones that I've seen. So if they were taken with his Retina 2 camera, either it had a timer or someone else was taking them. But anyway, this was a very frequent pastime that people who were in sanatoriums pursued. And in fact, I've never seen it. I don't think it's still there, but at Schatzalp in the cellar, there was at one time a developing room. Is that what they're called? A dark room for patients. So Dmitri would have gone down to the cellar to use that. And the cellar could be kind of a scary place because, you know, that's where the morgue was, although it was at the other end of the cellar from where the dark room would have been, I'm sure. But anyway, yeah, I'd love to see the photos that he took, and there would have been lots of opportunity to take scenic photos. I don't know if he would have been taking photos of his fellow patients, but you know, you've seen at least the background, the mountainscape when I was doing these at Schatzalp recently, and so yeah, I would assume that he took lots of photos from his balcony of the magnificent scenery, both in the snow and in the summer with the wildflowers in the meadow. Okay, so that's the 24th. We go on to the 25th of February, 1940, Saturday. Received a letter from Polly and Nanny from 3rd February. He's in a new school. In the morning, I went to the Parsennbahn ski derby with Dr. Holdner and his sister. Very interesting. The location is 1,000 meters higher than here. Returned blank. It's a good sign that they let me go. For a minute, it was very cold being so high up. Dined here, letter number 6 to Polly. Okay, he's writing a lot less these days. In the beginning, he was just writing one letter after another to all kinds of people, but maybe the fact that they don't seem to have replied to him, you know, took away his motivation for writing. Polly obviously replies to him. And he's also in touch with Nanny Hickling, who accompanied Polly to the U.S. in December 1939, but who was about to be sent back. And Dmitri had Dmitri had been an advocate of Nanny. He liked Nanny. He thought Nanny should be around for Polly. He didn't think Polly was going to be spending much time with his mother. But yeah, and he remembered when he specifically in a letter to Maria, he remembered how sad he and Maria had been when they were parted from their nanny. But you know, Polly is at this point, I think 13, so it is a bit of a push, and he's in boarding school. And I can't remember the name of the school. It was some kind of school by a director that was owned and directed by a man who'd been a professional athlete, and so athletics were going to be an important part of the formation of the boys at the school. And Polly liked it. He'd hated his British boarding school, his boarding school in England, so all of that was good. Then in the morning, he goes to the Parsennbahn ski derby. So if you go to Davos now, there's still a ski derby. There's a ski derby that's been going on since 1924. But since these days, I'm never there during the winter season. And since I'm not so into skiing, even when I've been there during the winter season, I've never gone up to see the Parsennbahn ski derby. But if you're in Davos, you can take the Parsennbahn up to this skiing area. And Dmitri's right, it's very high up. It's much higher than Schatzalp. It actually is, I wrote this down, 2,693 meters That's the Weissflugjoch, which is sort of the top, and that's almost 9,000 feet up. So that rivals, some of the mountains we have here. We have some high ones here where I live. Mount Hood is 11,000, I think, and Rainier is 14,000. And a lot of the, even though what I meant to say is a lot of the mountains in Switzerland, there certainly are some that are that big, but at least, there are a lot of them that they look absolutely daunting and magnificent, but they're not actually that high. 9,000 feet is high. Okay, that's a subject that interests me, so sorry yammering about that. Who was Dr. Holdner? Dr. Holdner was the assistant doctor at Schatzalp. Dr. Maurer, the great and powerful, brilliant, world-renowned surgeon, was the head doctor. Dr. Paul Holdner was the house doctor, was what he was called. And I don't know anything about his sister or who she was. I know very little about Dr. Holdner himself, whereas Maurer, there's tons of information on, and he was quite a character. But those were the two doctors that would primarily be taking care of Dmitri while he was at Schatzalp, and he socialized with both of them. So this is nice that he got to go up to the to see the Parsennbahn ski derby. I don't think he was a skier himself, aside from when he was a boy. He had, or a young man, we have his 1915 diary entries, for instance. He did cross-country skiing. He just went out with skis. I don't know if you can call it cross-country skiing, but he went out around his estates, Usovo, so on, and did some skiing. Yes, and so he was a big bobsledder. That was his passion when it came to winter sport. Anyway, I'm sure it was fun to see the derby, even though it was a little cold. Doesn't complain about the altitude. Yeah, and the doctors, I know for sure, it's recorded, and Dmitri records it, that Dr. Maurer, when a patient was depressed and not doing well, the doctors would really try hard to intervene. For one thing, they didn't want the person to leave the sanatorium, and for another thing, it's not good for a person physically either to be depressed. So, maybe it wasn't so very well advised for Dmitri to go up and see the Parsennbahn ski derby, but psychologically it was undoubtedly helpful. Okay, and here we go with the final diary entry for today, 26 February 1940. That was a Sunday. Weather overcast, but still lay on my balcony in the afternoon. The news from Finland isn't great. The Bolsheviks are advancing on Viipuri. I don't know how you say that in Finnish. Viipuri, and then Dmitri puts in parentheses Viborg. So interesting that he uses both the Finnish and the, it's not a Russian word, but it's what Viborg is what the city was called when it was part of the Russian Empire. So the Bolsheviks are, sorry, why did I intervene there? The Bolsheviks are advancing on Viipuri, Viborg, and it is already being shelled. The Finns are pleading for help. I feel well these days. I just don't have much appetite, and I'm having a lot of gas. Okay, that was a bit of an abrupt pivot, wasn't it? But he's back to talking about Finland. And I, of course, not being an expert on the Winter War and not having Alfred Bruyere at hand, I decided to ask AI about it. And what I found was interesting. It was bombed in 1939. It was a city of about 80,000 people, but it was evacuated. So by this time, there were only about 10,000 people left in the city. And then I quote from Google AI, the Battle of Viborg Bay, March 2nd through 13, 1940. So it was being shelled, but there wasn't a battle yet. That would come soon. And what AI wrote, I quote, as the Soviets mounted a massive offensive, they bypassed fortified land defenses by marching tens of thousands of troops across the thick ice of the frozen Vyborg Bay. The goal was to encircle Vyborg and cut the vital road to Helsinki. Okay, so I'm sure we'll be hearing more from Dmitri about that. In the meantime, he says the Finns are pleading for help, which I'm sure was true, although I didn't look up specifically what was going on at that particular time. And then this pivot. Finland. I feel well these days. Okay, that's good. Apparently he's not. He's gotten over these evening instances of illness. Maybe they gave him something for his stomach. I just don't have much appetite and I'm having a lot of gas. Okay, a gas passing Grand Duke. Well, Grand Dukes are human, aren't they? Okay, so what do we have next time? Well, more interesting, even more interesting stuff about Finland. What I mean to say is more interesting to me than in today's diary entry, and also a broadening of the war news. You know, we're not quite to the blitzkrieg in May yet, but things are starting to happen a little bit, you know, in the so-called phony war. So I hope you'll come back from that. I hope to see you next time. Bye.